Alright, so I'm going to do a commentary for a 24 court that I did this week. Again, it's a typical push group that we were going with for the last, I think it's 2 weeks, since we got together on a fort week. But this is the 24 court that we did. We did a few other keys this week. I think the only ones that we haven't done so far are Knock, a Temple, and I think that's it, actually. And yeah. So I'm running for court. It's a very single target oriented key. So I'm running the single target talents. Obviously running. I'm running Slick Ice. I'm not running the Frostbite Sub-Zero build. I'm running the Slick Ice, Splintering Cold. Just because it's a lot more of a single target dungeon compared to an AoE dungeon. I do the same thing even on fort weeks on Shadow Moon. I'm basically just our dedicated single target person, but I think for this key most of us are running single target anyways, just because a lot of the pulls are 2 or 3 target, if not 1 target, like the enforcers and stuff. So for our group, we don't actually have a rogue skip or a demon hunter or anything like that. So for the first mob, as a mage, you're actually able to skip it yourself. The only thing you have to do is make sure that you're the first person to actually buy it. So for me, you see, you can poly it, and then you have to be the first person to pass it, obviously, other than a stealth person. You need to be the first person to get into combat. So you saw my combat bars go away, which those go away as soon as I'm in combat. The way you get out of it now is I just have to invis once I get up top. Once I invis, I'll drop combat. But again, you need to make sure you're the first person to pass. Otherwise, that's not going to work. We are deciding that we're going to lust first pull, just to kind of get it on cooldown. We kind of want it. We want it for second mini boss. You can lust on the boss if you want, but we think just getting it on pull is a better use of lust. For these, you do want to tell your group to make sure that they're not interrupting fortification, which is the desk watch guards. I love getting silenced twice. Thank you, group. But so this is the fortification cast. Once you spell steal it, I spell steal it, it gives you the buff. It's a 25% haste and a 25% DR for 10 seconds. So it's very good at spell steal. So you can let your group get those off. I am running the double lust as well. I am running Dragon's Breath for the purpose of the imp pull. The imps are pretty important to have DB for, or at least AoE stuns. I am also polying the sentry, just to make sure we don't have to deal with an interrupt on him getting to the tower. You can, if you have some form of like grip or something, you can have a demon or a DK or something, grip the mob in. If you don't, you can just CC them and not worry about them for now. Worry about them when either in the middle of the pack or when the pack's done. As obviously having another kick you have to deal with during the charging station could be a little bit, especially because he's running away. It's also a very risky spot to be in because the padding construct, as well as the three pack in this room, you don't really want to pull that 3-pack. The Mana Sabers, especially on fort weeks, can basically one-shot you, especially if they're raging. Oh yeah, the affixes for this week were obviously, as you see, Fortified, Raging, Quaking. So it's a little bit of a rough week for some mobs, especially with Raging. But you saw the Mana Saber there. He wasn't even Raging, and he almost one-shot me. So be very careful. I did end up ice block. I ice blocked the buff off. You can ice block. You can also get it dispelled, but obviously as Frost Mage, we can really use our ice blocks liberally since we have 2 of them. I am saving Icy Veins here because I know it's going to be a 3-pack next. I know you. It's a weird thing for me. My decurse macro is just a decurse in general. If I have it moused over a friendly, it's a remove curse, and if it's over an enemy, it's spell steal. So I typically just bring my mouse over and I target a player, target the enemy, I guess, and just bring it over an open area and just use the spell steal. But For here, obviously the most important, actually the only important kicks for this are the ones in the construct. And then obviously you can spell steal all the fortifications. They actually do stack, so you saw me, I had 2 fortification stack debuffs. Not real important to actually have them stacked or not, but obviously a nice little buff to have. And especially since the DR, if you could hit with anything, but you shouldn't be getting hit with anything in this area anyways, especially on Fort Weeks, because you will most likely get one shot. So for court, you can run the talent Energized Barrier. It's in like the bottom right-hand section of your class tree, which basically, when you use Barrier, it removes all snares from you. So that's a way that you can remove the Arcane Lockdown from this boss. As you cast the Arcane Lockdown, it gives you the little thing you have to jump 3 times. For us, I talented into it anyways just for safety, but since we have a priest, the priest can mass dispel every single one, so I don't actually have to worry about it. But you know, in odd cases that, you know, there's a quaking going off, or the priest has like a laser over them at the time it happens, we have our own way to get away from it, to get rid of it. So obviously I am staying in melee here for the mass dispel. You see our healer immediately mass dispelled. So very useful for all of us not having to worry about actually jumping. I am an Ice Flows enjoyer as well. I actually think Ice Flows is very useful for this. For most dungeons this tier compared to Shimmer. A lot of the fights have like very small movement things. So like the first boss of this, obviously you're dodging the lasers. That's pretty small movement, and you're not going to have guaranteed instance when that comes up. Second boss, the Infernal Eruption that happens, you can just Ice Flows while casting while getting out of it, which I'll also talk about there some. And then the third boss, I think Ice Flows is very beneficial. I basically lose 0 damage on the third boss, and I'm the person baiting because I'm running Ice Flows. Obviously, it's a personal choice, Ice Flows versus Shimmer, but I am an advocate for Ice Flows. Especially in the keys this season, it seems like Ice Flows does have a little bit more value, but there are people that are dedicated to Shimmer and will use Shimmer, and it's, like I said, it's a personal choice. So I am lusting here. I know it's kind of going to be a shit lust because it's already at 30% and the boss is going to be done at 25 since we had the file. The reason behind this is because I want lust up for the second mini boss, or whenever we're going to lust as a group. So I basically just need to get my lust on cooldown as soon as possible. And now for this next portion, this is a mage skip that you can do. Typically you have a priest can do it with Fade, you know, druids can do it, rogues can do it. It is typically like rogues if you have one in your group, but you can actually skip this construct, and this is the skip to get into like the next area. So while I'm doing this, my group's actually going back and doing the dox pull. RIP my overalls, but you know, whatever. The trick for this, obviously pull him. Doesn't matter what you pull him with, just pull him. I use Mirror Image to guarantee that I get past him no matter what. And he's targeting my Mirror Images. Once my Mirror Images are all dead and I see that he's targeted me, use Invis. So you saw me, I'm waiting on using Invis until he does it. I cast Mirror Image, or Invis, and now I've dropped Threat. The reason behind that is because he has True Sight, so you need a way to actually get past him. I had a pull or a dungeon earlier where I think it's slightly bugged because all my Mirror Images weren't dead when I Invised. So he actually came and just meleeed me to like one meleeed me while I was running up the stairs. So just be very careful with that. And obviously once you get through here, the doors open once you get past this door. So you just die to these mobs here, release, and then I'm gonna join them in the fight on dox. I am polying this mob. I saw his Mind Soothe. Didn't obviously need to do that, but make it so we don't need to worry about him actually running away during the fight. Again, all of these mobs you can spell steal fortification if you want. I typically think it's really only worth to do 1, maybe 2. You don't need to worry about doing more than that. And obviously this is typical AoE rotation. Orb and Blizzard up as much as you can. Use your Fingers of Frost procs. If you don't have any Fingers of Frost procs and you're in AoE, just send a Flurry without a Frostbolt. and then you can use Ice Nova as a filler as well. So I did say I needed a pull before imps just because I didn't have CDs. I had no Icy Veins, but I don't think our tank saw it. So our stun rotation for the imps is I'm the first two, followed by the paladin, and then followed by any other stuns after that. We should basically be done by the time we go through the third set of stuns, but on fort weeks they might end up lasting a little longer. So that's why I especially take DB, because you actually need them to interrupt these imps. I actually missed a decent chunk of the casts, as you saw my health get chunked. I couldn't tell half the casts from the shield, which was my fault, and then we also overlapped in Cap Roar, which was quite the yikes, but now we just gotta kill them in time. We did Psychic Scream, Vortex Typhoon, and they were dead now, but very sloppy from us. Obviously started out sloppy with me missing Blast Wave, but didn't help that we had like no or at least I had no damage going into it. Because I normally typically a pretty big chunk of damage, because I always open those packs with oh, I'll stop here because our tank died. But normally I open those packs with Icy Veins going into Orb, into a Freezing Rain or Blizzard, and then Icy Veins Orb, and then you can Ice Nova. You can normally get at least like 3 or 4 globals off before they actually finish their first cast, and then obviously your next cast is going to be Dragon's Breath, but I obviously didn't have the damage going in. So also something that I wasn't used to is not having Icy Veins for the imp pull. I'm used to the amount of cast getting off that I can get off before the Firebolts and Drifting Embers actually goes off before I need a Dragon's Breath. And having that reduced haste definitely made those first few casts get off, which is what I got chunked from. So it's obviously something that can get cleaned up. Our tank died here, which I'm not really sure to what, but I immediately popped Mirror Image, which means this person who was running at me went to targeting my Mirror Image, and obviously one of them just got meleeed to death. And now it's targeting another one. But it was definitely a very sloppy pull right here. These two pulls. We are pulling the mini boss here. Oh, I am running the Corrupting Rage file. I started using it this week to try it out. I definitely think it helps in our AoE. I'm not really sure this is a dungeon that you need to be running it on. I might actually run the verse file on this one in future weeks, just because Corrupting Rage is really you get a lot more value of it in AoE dungeons, just from the amount of crit that you get from your orbs and blizzards during AoE. But I'll have to do some further testing to see if it's really worth in this dungeon or not. This is also a really important mob for raging. If the Scream of Pain or whatever it's called goes off when it's raged, that one, and it's not soothed, it will just one-shot your entire group. As you see, I was prepared to. I was normally going to be prepared to ice block, but I decided not to ice block and just to go for G-Invis. And you saw I literally took 0 damage in G-Invis, so yeah. But if that's not soothed, obviously there's nothing we can do about it as mages, other than if it's not, you just ice block or G-Invis and pray for the best. But yeah. Some of these pulls are a little bit. This is part of the reason why you typically run the single target in this dungeon, just because a lot of these pulls are either going to be 2 or 3 targets like max, other than the imps pull and the docs pull, and then obviously like the construct pull at the very start with the little whelps, the mana whelps or whatever they're called. But most of this dungeon is very low target count, so running your full AoE build isn't really great. Eyes, you can see that you just can't type. You literally see it now. You are incapable of typing. Again, we have the imp pull here. I also said I actually didn't call that I needed time here. I think I end up doing it here. Yeah, so I didn't actually have Dragon's Breath coming up for the this pull here. I kind of said it a little too late. I just said wait, and then he just chucked the shield. You know, typical Paladin tank things, but, you know, kind of on me too for not letting him know. Because I noticed that, I immediately shifting powered without using anything else. Because I needed to get my Dragon's Breath up, because I am the first 2 kicks. And obviously I need to start with Dragon's Breath. I did have Icy Veins again for this pull, but... And then I have Blast Wave, which... My Blast Wave didn't even hit half the mobs, which I'm not really sure why. I think it was just because they were in Captor at the time, but... As you can see, I mean, our warrior obviously pumped them with Spear and his other cooldowns, but I'm still obviously a decent chunk of damage there. So missing that in the first pack is why it lasted so long as well. So I am saving Lust here. We decided we're going to save Lust for the mini-boss, the second mini-boss, just because... The impending doom is just a lot of damage, plus there's a lot of kicks going out there, so we just kind of want to get it down as soon as possible. There's no really big pull that's worrisome in this other than the mini bosses, so obviously the third mini boss is just a frontal, and there's no other damage going out from him other than on the tank, so... Now for the Enforcers, you want to make sure you basically have Blizzard up when you go around the corner, because you're obviously going to be LOSing. You see me blizzarding an area. During Quaking, if you can, either ice block it in the open. If Quaking overlaps, which obviously the only weeks that's gonna happen on is Quaking weeks. But if Quaking overlaps, you can obviously ice block out in the open, or just do what I did. I just blinked out away from the group to give them the space they needed, because they don't really have the mobility that I do as a mage. So you see me again casting Blizzard while I'm in not an LOS. Obviously, you shouldn't be casting Blizzard on single target, but obviously it's free damage that I can't really be doing otherwise, so might as well be getting some damage out. I decided not to pop Icy Veins here. I wanted Icy Veins for the boss because it is kind of bad. Not that I'm holding Icy Veins, but the fact that there's downtime between the Enforcers and the mini-bosses, it's kind of rough for Icy Veins uptime in this key. You kind of just gotta know when you want to use your cooldowns. Also depends on the pulls you're doing, but since I knew we were lusting here, I also wanted Icy Veins. I held my Icy Veins for this pull. And obviously, as you see, a very strong single target spec, as I am currently doing 120k. Granted, it's during Lust and Icy Veins, but... so Impending Doom, you can... I wouldn't recommend using Ice Block, because Ice Block still will remove the charge. Like, we'll remove it. Again, this was another spot here that we didn't really communicate on. So obviously I'm supposed to be the first 2 interrupts for the imps, but I wasn't in this case. Again, just something we're not communicating because we're not using comms. But he used Blinding Light, which I saw first, and then I go with the DB, and then a second one, Blast Wave. Again, we're overlapping CCs, and you see a few casts get out. Our healer unfortunately dies because of it, but not really sure why we're changing our CC order. You know what happens when we're not in comms. I know I'm not entirely sure. For Eye of the Storm, it's something you typically want to be CC'd. I don't think Dragon's Breath actually CCs it, but Blast Wave does. So if you can use Blast Wave for the Eye of the Storm, which is something the Inquisitor does. And obviously, it's a little unfortunate for me here. I don't have Icy Vein, so I just decided to use my other Lust here in hopes of getting it back. I also use my Rune of Power because my Icy Vein isn't up for, it looks like, about like 30 seconds here. I'm not really getting value out of my rune here, though. I've tried moving back into it there, but it immediately dropped again. And then basically after this, we still need some trash. We're only at 86%, and you need, I think it's like 93 point, I want to say it's like 93.6 or something like that. I'll have to check the exact amount because I think we end up being like exact on the amount. But the last mob gives like 6 point something %. We did end up pulling, as I said, these mini bosses aren't really a issue, other than the second one, which is the one we saved Lust on. We obviously pulled this pack into this mini boss. This mini boss, like I said, does nothing. It literally is just a frontal, and then the crushing leap. So if you can, it's great to coordinate these pulls. We also didn't have coordinated for kicks, but the only thing we were coordinating is, or at least not really coordinating, but something that we can see is the kick tracker that I have. I think we basically just assumed that the Paladin was going to get most of the kicks on the construct, and then I think we were having our Druid get most of the Searing Glares from the Inquisitor, if possible, because I'm not positive you can actually solo kick it. I think you actually need 2 kicks to kick the Inquisitor. Okay, so this is actually the exact amount. You need 93.68, so the last map gives 6.32%. Which obviously some people in our group still didn't know the exact percent that it gives. It's not common that you end up being exact. So for these, the Infernal Eruption, you obviously stack for the circles. What I typically like doing is once it happens, I will run out and I'll Ice Flows and cast a Blizzard, so that I have uptime there. And then if you can, have a rune up for basically every single phase of them. Obviously, our warrior just absolutely deleted that first one, so it didn't really matter too much. But you don't need to be stacked for these until you get Infernal Eruption, which, especially on this week, is kind of fortunate because Waking sometimes overlaps with it. You can also use stops for these ones. So again, here I go with a precasted Blizzard into Rune of Power, just to have that up. I am using... Oh, wow, I just skipped all the way back. No one saw that. I am using Ice Nova. Wait. I am using Ice Nova as a filler in this AoE. And then I also need to be using my CCs. So, again, since I'm the first CC, any ones that I know that I saw weren't dying quickly is when I was going to use my CCs for it. So Dragon's Breath and DB. And then I kind of just hope for the other ones that they know that I'm used it for that one and they're going to have to use it for the other ones. But yeah, try and have... You should be able to have Orb and a Rune up for not everyone. Orb you should be able to have up for everyone, but Rune you should have up for like every other one, either out of Icy Veins or just hard-casted Rune. And then if you can, use your other interrupts for the imps themselves if you don't have any AoE stuns. Your tank should be the one that's primarily getting the Withering Soul on you guys. And again, you saw a Ice Flows into a Blizzard cast. And the boss basically should be dead at this point. Since we didn't get any of the ads at the very beginning, we have to fail one of the to finding the spies here. So you just have someone choose a random spy and just lose. So that way the reason you do that is so you get fast RP. You need to fail. You need to have either an ad at the beginning, so you don't choose all of the you don't get all of the pillars at the very beginning of the key, or you have to fail one of these checks at the very end. So yeah. For here, the druid just failed the druid just failed it, so that means we'll get the short RP. Like I said, you either need the short RP by either failing it here, which is you just choose a wrong spy, or you leave one of the pillars up at the beginning. I'm asking here if I'm able to use my second lust, or my personal lust. At this point, I know that if I use my personal lust, I know I'm not going to get it back in time for the group. Because and the shortest amount of time that you can get your lust back in is 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And that's basically if you use your shifting power the second you use lust, and every time it immediately comes up. Typically it's going to be a little bit longer than that. But typically it's good to have another lust in the group, but our group doesn't, so I kind of have to be very aware of my lust usage. But I am getting PI for bosses and single target situations like this. I'm the designated PI for most bosses, unless it's the warrior has specific things that he needs for bosses. But for these, the bats themselves, if anyone played in Shadowlands Season 4 with the seasonal affix, it's the same type of bats it's the same CCs that you can get by them. So for mages now, it's DB and Polymorph works for all the bats to get rid of the hypnosis. Blast Wave does not, unfortunately, work since it's just it doesn't actually interrupt the cast. So if you have in need of having to CC one of the mobs, those are your two options as a mage. This mob, especially on fortified weeks, you can use your defensives for the shadow bolt volley, either barrier or, for me, I typically just like using alter time. I knew that I wasn't going to die to just one shadow bolt volley, and there's no other damage going on in this fight other than those volleys. As you see, one of them just hit me down 60% health, so I'm not too worried about it. But if you want to, you can help your healer use mirror image, use barrier, doesn't really matter. Obviously, alter time's a very good one. It's no downside to it for that. You can just alter time the shadow bolt volleys. You see, I alter time to here and immediately back to 100%, so it doesn't no downside for those. For this last area is especially one where I am going to be the person baiting for all of the blade surges. So the blade surge, the way it works is it basically baits on someone that's farther than 7 yards away from the boss, or I think that's the number of yards. But it's actually not that far from the boss, so you basically need to tell everybody to play in melee other than the person who's baiting. And there's a specific sequence of casts that happens. So he'll start the fight, he'll go into a blade surge, followed by, I think it's called Raging Quell or something like that. I'll talk about it here when the fight actually starts, but there's a set sequence of spells that he will follow every single time. So I always like baiting in this corner, just because it gives me two avenues to get out of. Blade Surge followed by Piercing Gale, followed by another Blade Surge, and then Slicing Maelstrom, and that's the same way that it is for the entire fight. And as you see, you can actually bait the Blade Surges in the exact same spots every single time. Very good for range to do that. It makes the fight very easy for melee players. There is something that I'm debating on trying for our group, basically giving us more uptime if possible. I want to try stacking not so far away, because melee do lose some uptime from the boss traveling from all the way over here to here. I want to try min-maxing kind of the distance that he has to travel, so if they're tanking it here, maybe, I can do my Ice Flows thing here, so he's only traveling this distance. But that's something that I kind of need to try out. So for the first one, I actually don't use any defensives. You don't need to use defensives for the first Slicing Maelstrom. And then immediately after Slicing Maelstrom, he goes into a Blade Surge. The way to use Rune of Power, just like I did here, put your Rune of Power off to the side. Don't put it on the actual spot. Rune of Power does actually reach all the way out here. As you saw, I use it out here and it reaches all the way inside. But put it onto the sides so you can obviously use it no matter what. And obviously just, you know, baiting these in the same spot over and over again. During Thundering, we had done it in previous weeks, so I'm not sure what changed this week, but if you do end up being one of the positive buffs, let your team know that you will come to them in downtime, because some of them might not know the exact like sequence or like when the baits are happening. So here, one of our players came to clear with me, thinking that they had to clear with me, and it obviously put a bait in a bad spot, but... For the second one, I alter timed for it. The second one's one of the least, I think it's the second least damage that will go out in the entire fight. So you don't really need as much defenses for it as possible, but alter time is obviously fine. It's a short cool, it's a 50-second cooldown. You can just alter when it starts and immediately alter back. You saw I just immediately went back to 100 HP, 100% HP, so. And again, now the Piercing Gale wasn't too bad. It still wasn't too far off, but still wasn't great now that it's not in the same spot. And so the way that Slicing Maelstrom works is the damage is increased if you're close to the boss or close to the images. And so there's 4 images out at a time, and those images are spawned by Blade Surge. And so whether you're close to the images or close to the boss, you'll take increased damage. So if you can during Slicing Maelstrom, try and get further away from the images, as far away as possible as you can, but just enough that you can be back in the same spot for Blade Surge as possible. So you see for the second Slicing Maelstrom, I used both Barrier and Images for it. This is the third one, sorry. The second one I used Alter Time. And then for the fourth one, I'm going to be using Greater Invis for it. Greater Invis basically lasts the entire duration of it. So Greater Invis is a great defensive for it, a 60% DR for the entire duration of Slicing Maelstrom. As you see, I'm basically losing no uptime using Ice Flows. There is another, I'm wondering if I actually do end up having to use it here. There is another usage for Ice Flows here over Shimmer. And I'm hoping it will end up happening. Okay, it does happen. So these little circles, whenever you run into them, it actually stuns you. Typically you have a rogue or a paladin can bop and run through it, or a hunter can turtle and run through them, or the healer can dispel them, because it's something that can get dispelled. For me, running Ice Flows, Blink actually gets you out, the default Blink, not Shimmer. Blink will get you out of any stuns and bonds. So I can actually blink out of every single one of these stuns if there happens to be one near me. So the way I do it is like I'm doing it here. When I know there's a downtime period, I run into the spell and just immediately blink, and it gets rid of the dispel. Again, I had used nothing for the first, I used Alter for the second, I used Barrier and Images for the third, G and Fizz for the fourth. The fifth one you'll have Alter back up. And obviously your healer is going to be rolling CDs for some of them, so you can let them know what your plan is if you really want. So here it's definitely getting a little dicey with the stuns. You saw I cleared one there. There's a second one near here, but I'm just trying to make sure I have as much room as possible. And but yeah, this is kind of why I want to run Blink as well in Ice Flows. First boss is very good, just running Ice Flows, getting out of the lasers. Second boss, it's very good for being able to Ice Flows and Blizzard and pre-cast a Blizzard for the imps. And then this third boss, just having Ice Flows for when you're baiting Blade Surges, so you obviously can cast the whole time, and as well as having actual Blink so that you can clear the circles. The circles, obviously, like I said, can be dispelled. But if you can do it on your own, it's fine. Human Racial also works, you can Ice Block it. But obviously you want to be saving Ice Block for the Slicing Maelstrom phases, because sometimes they really are going to hurt later on in the fight, so. But yeah, that's the commentary for the 24 court. We had originally done a 25 before this, and pulled a few things. Or actually, we hadn't done a 24 for this one. It had been in a previous week. We had done some a higher court and did some oopsies, but this was basically our warm-up key for the rest of the day, which we did some more key. I think this is the day that we did, we started doing some Azure Vault and Algathars and stuff like that. Obviously, Court and Shadow Moon are considered 2 of the easier dungeons this tier, so if you have them for warm-up keys, if you're, in or like in a group, I'd recommend using those as like warm-up keys. But yeah, that was the commentary for the 24 Court. You see I topped the overalls, but obviously the overalls are a little different because I obviously missed out on all the damage that was done in the Dox pull. So obviously probably was not anywhere close to the top of the meters, but but yeah, that's the commentary for the 24 Fortified Court.